I exist, and I know that, and I know that I can doubt, what else can I know? Is that the only thing, right? So he's got the founding principle, but he's trying to say, can I then reason from that founding principle that other things exist? Or is he stuck with saying, I'm a skeptic and I can't possibly know anything other than I exist? All right, so we've got then these two first principles to begin with, right? The cogito ergo sum identifies two things. One is I think, and the other is I exist. So we have essentially two propositions that he's saying are absolutely indisputable propositions that we start with. I think and I exist. Now, what is I? That's a major question. If you say I exist, well, what is the I? Because does thinking identify that you exist as body and soul? Not by itself. And here's a major shift that ends up really shaping a lot of the way that modern philosophy thinks about thinking, or thinks about the human person, the intellect, and ideas. What is I? Well, if the only thing that I know is there's something thinking, and that's what makes the I, then I am defined as a thinking thing. So what is the I? I am a thinking thing. And that means that I am defined not primarily by my local extension. What I mean by that is my body, my matter, the stuff that makes me up. What defines me, it's not body and soul, it's not body, soul, spirit, it's not soul or body, it's thinking. The thinking thing is what makes up a person. And this also leads toward a shift in the way that we start thinking about ideas as a whole. Because for Descartes, thinking is about an impression. It's an immediate, in the moment, present, conscious activity. So thinking is his own sensation of thinking at that moment, a conscious sensation of doing the thing that is thinking. What shifts there is that in classical philosophy, thinking is defined by a contemplation of universal ideas. So we're talking about something that is not just limited to personal conscious experience at one moment, but we're talking about the nature of the intellect as a whole. So rationality, your ability to think through problems, your ability to look at something and interpret it. But for Descartes, thinking is not about this connection with universal ideas, but it's about conscious moment. Right now, I feel that I am thinking. And that leads toward a shift in philosophy, but also in theology as well, significantly, that no longer are we thinking about revelation later on in Christian theology in terms of an objective thing that has been revealed about universal truths or the nature of history. Revelation becomes the immediate contact of God with the conscious thinking mind. That's what you find in somebody like a Friedrich Schleiermacher, but also with Rudolf Bultmann in the 20th century. And plenty of other people do something similar to that. So instead of this, there's not this focus on these universal things. He's not really a realist. Descartes is basically coming from that nominalist perspective. So when he's thinking about how the mind works, we're not connecting to universals. We have a conscious experience of what's happening around us or in our own heads. He's an idealist in his starting point rather than an empiricist, which means that ideas are the first reality, the ultimate reality, rather than experience. So our knowledge comes through thought rather than our experience, our sense experience, meaning our taste, touch, sight, how we experience the world with our bodies. Instead, we start with the realm of ideas, the ideas that we have. Now, he's not going to dismiss conscious experience by any means. And later, from Descartes, we have these clearer divides into the idealists and the empiricists, or rationalists and empiricists, where you have a kind of battle between those who are looking at sense experience and those who are arguing for universal intellectual propositions and deductive reasoning as the way to find truth. So you have like Hume is for example, an empiricist, and then you have Kant who kind of tries to blend both things together. And then you have German idealism, which is Kant, but then you also have Hegel later on. Okay, so from deductive reasoning, what Descartes is then going to argue, so he's going to say, I know I exist, and I am a thinking thing. Thinking is a conscious activity that I have. There is thinking and there is myself. And how then do we get to the existence of the external world? Or can we? Well, he doesn't move from the I to the external world. He's got a step between that, which is the existence of God. So he's going to make an argument. He's going to make a couple different arguments, largely one argument, but he's going to make an argument that God exists. And that argument is going to be based on what he knows from those two first principles. And so he believes then that he has now created a third indisputable principle, which is that God exists. So I think, I exist, God exists. Once he comes to that perspective, he discusses the nature of God. Is God good? If God is perfect, God must be good, because goodness implies, or perfection implies goodness. To be good is better than to be bad. So to be perfect, you have to be good, or the ultimate good. If we do believe that God is the ultimate good, right? If God is perfect, that means that we can trust that he would not deceive us. So if I am created by a perfect being that is God, that means that the devil scenario, or the genie scenario that we talked about before, doesn't really have a leg to stand on. We don't have this evil genie in charge of all things. We have a good God that is in charge of all things. And that means that God wouldn't deceive us like the evil genie would. So therefore, we can generally rely on our senses to point us to reality. So Descartes, though he begins with skepticism, comes to this indisputable principle, two indisputable principles, then adds the third, which is God's existence. From God's existence, now he reasons that I can rely on my sense experience. So the point is, what Descartes comes out of here, he comes out from skepticism with a general reliability about the nature of the world. So where Descartes ends is not in this position of we don't really know anything, or we just have to stay in our heads. He's trying to have an indisputable proof about the existence of the natural world, about our experiences of the natural world really being something that points us to reality. But the question is then, does he actually make that argument strongly enough? Is the argument for God's existence and then the existence of the natural world based on God's existence, is that really strong enough to make a definitive case?